and not necessarily of this station, its management, or other advertisers.
This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to Life Mastery with Todd Allen, the talk radio show that dives into the science of higher consciousness. Join Todd and his guests weekly at 10 a.m. Pacific Time and learn how to live a peaceful life with intentional mastery. Enjoy a survey of inspiring topics such as abundance, intention, health, manifestation, love, and transformation. It's all right here. Leading authors, speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs with stories and messages to support your well-being, let alone your most evocative dreams.
Yay, I did it. I got it shared before the show started. hey, there is a live stream, Facebook Live on both pages, Life Mastery Radio, and on my personal page. So you can go check it out. If you're listening to the audio, you can go see who's really talking to you. Welcome to Life Mastery Radio, the talk show that brings you great thoughts and ideas for you to use on your very own life mastery journey. And today is a really, really groovy day. I had to get that in, Jackie. Every day is groovy. When I got up this morning, I decided it was going to be a groovy day, and especially because it's Life Mastery Radio Day, and we have a couple of really, really cool guests for you. So it's all going to be groovy. But first, let's just take a minute, get ourselves connected and situated. And what I want you to think about just for a second here is everything that you're grateful for. What is it that you're grateful for? Just pick a couple of things. And then let's take in a deep breath all the way down into the solar plexus. And then let that breath out with just a big ah. And let that gratitude flow up through your heart center, through your throat chakra, and right out of your speaker box out into the universe. And let the universe know those things that you're grateful for. Let's do that just one more time. Take in a deep breath. And this time, think about those dreams, visions, and goals. What is it that you aspire to do or be? Now let's let that out with another big ah, and let those dreams, visions, and goals flow up, heart center, throat chakra, right out of your speaker box, out into the universe. And for sure, think about letting the universe the opportunity to make those come true for you. Okay, Jackie's smiling. I got her to smile. Looks like Tahnee, our guest, is smiling. Alan's smiling now. Yay, I've succeeded in getting everybody to smile. As always, I have my co-host with me today, Jackie Bailey. Hi, Jackie.
Hello. What's up?
It's one of those days, but you know what? It's still groovy.
It is groovy.
How's things in the Speak Feed Lead arena? Picking up?
Not necessarily, but we are getting excited about hashtag Giving Tuesday, is our global movement that we are happy to participate in because we are a nonprofit. And we've got some new connections around the nation here to work with some disadvantaged kids. So we're looking forward to ironing those details out. And yeah, we're surviving every day, but we're still around. So it's all good.
It is all good in this ever-evolving, changing world and shock and awe. But I think everybody's getting settled in the groove. So I think it is evolving into a good thing. At least that's my hope, is it's a good thing.
Yeah.
What else can you tell us about Speak Feed Lead? Where can they find you?
They can find us at Speak Feed, you can see behind me, speakfeedlead.org. And that is our name because we help children, teenagers, adults who are homeless, who are underserved, who are in the foster care system, who are coming out of traffic situations. We help all of them to speak with power, to feed others in word and deed, and to lead with positive influence.
Yeah.
And on hashtag Tuesday, we're going to be having a rally, an online rally called the Speak Up, Reach Out, and Lead with Influence rally. It's 4 hours long. And we're inviting everybody to come on and talk about their experiences speaking out and reaching out and helping others in leadership positions. So if you've got a story you want to share, come on and we'll give you the spotlight, give you a forum to say what you want to say. Speak up.
Pretty cool.
That's what we're doing.
And what's the date on that?
December 1st.
December 1st. Be here before
Okay,
you
right
know
after
it. Right after
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Mhm.
Very cool. I want to remind our listeners that today's show page is at www.lifemasteryradio.net or .com. Either one will get you there. And any links that we talk about, you'll find our guests there. I'll write up about our guests and a link to their website. A little bit later on in the week, Jackie will create a blog post about this show and what she took away, and it's really cool. Then we combine that blog post with the recording, and it's on our YouTube channel. Jackie, there's over 100 shows on our YouTube channel now.
I know, isn't that awesome?
It's
And we
crazy.
should have had some sort of celebration when we reached 100.
I would have
shows.
never imagined when I first started doing radio that I would have all these videos on YouTube. It's just crazy, but it's pretty cool. It's a great record. My grandkids will be thrilled.
But how many podcast shows do you have? Because you were making an audio podcast prior to going on video, right?
There's over 500.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. My voice is out there. Da, 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 da. People of the
Ta-da,
earth.
it's being heard.
People of the earth, can you hear me? That was my vision, believe it or not. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. I also want to remind the listeners at the website, you can find my book, 6 Keys to Life Mastery, Unlocking Life Skills for Successful Living. It's a really cool book. It's a really short read, and it is what I found out, what I discovered on my
And it's
journey.
masterful.
It's masterful. Okay, are we done cleaning the house? I think we are. Are you ready for the show?
Yeah, this is going to be
excited.
cool. I can't wait
Yeah,
to talk
I
to
think so too.
Tahnee and Alan because this is going to be neat.
Our guests today are co-creators and colleagues. Alan David Reed and Tahnee Woolf collaborated together over several years to create the 10 terrains of consciousness model. Who are these two? Well, I feel like I'm here today in the midst of giants, to tell you the truth. But let me just introduce each one and you can judge for yourself. Tahnee Woolf is a modern Renaissance woman. She has been a corporate lawyer, Oxford scholar, screenwriter, radio show host, personal development coach, workshop facilitator, spiritual channel, high-level writer, inspirational speaker, and public speaking mentor. Oh, Jackie, there you go.
Yeah.
She is a gifted communicator, storyteller, wordsmith, linguist, and is highly skilled at reading human dynamics in all forms. Loves to hold space for deep sharing and growth in others. Me too. I just love that. Thrives on laughter and joy and is a heart opener and inspirational spirit. So that's Tahnee. She's the woman. If you couldn't have figured that out. And now for Alan. Alan is a leading luminary on the study of infinite consciousness, spiritual evolution, and human nature. With a diverse background in business strategy, entrepreneurship, technology, architecture, and planning, law, political analysis, science and dowsing. Dowsing's pretty cool. Mystic studies and more. Alan is a living resource offering a unique perspective on our planet. Like I said, I'm in the presence of giants today. Welcome, you two. How are you today?
Oh, we're great, Todd. Thank you for having us, and good to meet you both, Jackie.
Yeah, it's really great to be here on the show. Thanks for having us.
So I want to let our listeners know they are from Australia. And in Seattle right now, it's just a little bit after 10 a.m. And in Australia, it's probably just a little after 5 a.m. Is that correct? Or is it
A day ahead of you at this point?
Yeah, we're coming from the future.
So what happens the rest of this day?
Yeah.
Tell us.
What am I going to be in for?
Yeah.
Tuesday was a great day. Tuesday was a great day. You're going to have an awesome time.
Yeah,
Good.
You're gonna have great news and epiphanies and beautiful connections.
weather was nice.
So Tahnee, let's start off with you. How did you, I mean, you are hugely successful, obviously, and I got to ask you this first. Did you write that bio?
I probably did. I do all the writing for the project. So anything that has words in it probably came.
It's very well done. But how did, let's just get a little bit of the backstory. How did you get into conscious awareness, and did this, were you pulled to this? Did you make an effort to do it, or did it just come naturally?
Well,
Okay.
neither of us consciously set out to create this model. It really just came out of both of our lives and how our lives have unfolded, and the field that opens up between us when we're together. But just speaking for myself personally, I've always been a very deep thinker and an inquirer, and very deeply interested in my own personal growth journey. But I think the real driver for this work for me came from, I always wanted to understand the people I loved. I wanted to understand the differences between them, why they didn't get along. I always just wanted to have harmony with everybody. And I think as a child, I didn't know it at the time, but I know it now, that my parents were at two very different terrains of consciousness, quite far apart from each other on the continuum of terrains. And my sister and I were also at different terrains. And I just spent my whole life trying to figure out, like, what is underneath the differences. And then, as you heard from my bio, I've done lots of different things in my life. I've been in very different worlds with people, really, I realize now, who were all at very different terrains. And I was just always really trying to understand what was underneath the differences, what was driving the dynamics between people. And then I had quite a long healing journey that I went on personally, because I suffered from really severe chronic pain and couldn't walk. And I probably spent 20 years really going deeply into my own journey of healing. And it took me on a very deep journey, first moving from my head into my heart, and moving from focus on the external world to a very deep inner journey. And I was at the end of a very long inner journey where my awareness had expanded, and I was starting to be more telepathic and work with spirit guides. And I was at a point in my journey around the time I met Alan, and you'll hear from him in a minute. He had his own long journey through his evolution. And I think at the point we met, we were very much brought together by spirit to do this work. We originally started coming together for a romantic relationship. We were kind of tricked into it.
That's the trick, right? That's the trick.
In reality, we realized that no, that's not what we're here for. And we were just, because we were in a romantic relationship, we were together 24/7, always, together. And we found ourselves constantly talking about these ideas and having this information come through whenever we were together. And we started to realize, hang on, something's happening here. We need to start writing this down. So we never set out to develop a 10 terrains model. We kept asking ourselves, what is underneath the differences between people, for our own knowledge, and also just to understand marketing, and for our various projects we were both doing, more spiritual projects, and we were doing different things in our careers, and we were always trying to understand how to explain things and how to market things and how to target things to people, and also just understand our own friends and family. And Alan's got a very big focus on the political and economic spectrum, so I was always focused more on the people, and he was more focused on the macro stuff. But between us, we were always looking at patterns, what is underneath everything.
Wow.
And because we've both had quite an expansive journey through our own lives, our perspective is really one of coming from the place of the infinite perfection of everything. That's where we're at in our own journey. So it's like when we look from that perspective of what is the bigger picture of everything happening in terms of bringing us all back to our infinite self, how does that play out when you start to understand people? So that's really what brought us point.
Sometimes it takes those challenges, right, Tahnee, to bring us to that understanding. And when we look back, they're truly gifts that kind of molded us and put us in a direction to even dig deeper into our own understanding. So I think a lot of people could benefit from that recognition. So that's really cool. So Alan, you met this gorgeous blonde and you were just taken away and decided that consciousness was the deal. Is that the deal? No, I'm just kidding.
It flew across the ocean from America.
I'm picking that up.
Well, it's been for me also a very interesting journey, having grown up, I was in the Seattle, Washington area as a child.
Really?
In the woods back when they had woods back over in Kirkland. And I really didn't have much of a connection with my family, so I'd escape to the woods. And the trees and the animals really kind of taught me a lot when I was a child. And it kind of brought me on a journey of my life to understand human nature and understand why we had become so disconnected from nature. And so for me, it's been really asking a very deep question of who are we and why are we doing the things we're doing, which has brought me through all of the sciences and the religions, and just really, I just dug into everything. The mystery schools throughout my life. I've been kind of half scientist. And what I kind of came to see is that what we are doing in many cases is seeing things the opposite of what's really happening. And just as you mentioned about, everything's a gift. Well, we see things from one perspective, but actually, if you could flip that around from a spiritual perspective, it's really the opposite. So I have this sort of axiom, I call it Reed's 180 rule. Everything is the opposite of what you perceive it to be until you have direct perception or, become enlightened. And then that's the real gotcha on this planet. So with that sort of background and understanding, I really started looking at just everything, including consciousness. And I worked for many years with a foundation of very top scientists around the world. And we were really studying the hard questions of science and consciousness and being. And what I became what became obvious is that consciousness is a non-local thing. It's not coming out of our brains as psychology tends to think in the present. They don't have any greater perspective than that. We are living in a universe that is conscious. And I did a lot of research with near-death experiences, and it showed clearly, and now all of the quantum physics is really supporting this, that this entire universe, every subatomic particle is simultaneously aware of itself across every galaxy of trillions of stars. So when you have that understanding, this model just really lays over that as a map of consciousness. And so with that, everything is like when science when they finally put the sun in the middle and the earth and the planets came around it, everything fell into a very elegant order. Well, what we've done is basically flipped things around so that now everything is related to an infinite non-local consciousness, and it just falls right into place. And what we're looking at here is a map and a model of ourselves as infinite consciousness underneath, all of it, and what degree we've essentially separated ourselves away from that awareness and forgotten who we are and lost belief in ourselves. And so what this whole journey is about is coming back home, because it's a self-healing universe. It's a self-healing, our bodies heal it themselves. Well, consciousness is healing us back to itself. So we're really on a journey of self-learning and self-belief and self-acceptance and self-love, because through whatever we've done over lifetimes, we've kind of lost our way. And so we're healing ourselves back in this time.
Totally. Wait a sec. We got to back the truck up a little bit, because I grew up in Kirkland in the woods.
Okay.
Wow.
I lived on top of Finn Hill.
You did? Because I lived on Finn Hill.
I think we knew that.
Not growing up together, but
no,
I
your kids
here.
went to Carl Sandburg and I went to Carl Sandburg.
Ah, that is so weird.
So
I don't think
Alan,
I knew that.
where in Kirkland were you at?
I think 113th Northeast is the number I remember vaguely. And
What schools did you go to?
it was
You moved to
Wait,
California.
Lakeview Elementary and
What elementary? Juanita?
Lakeview. Was it
Oh,
Lakeview?
Lakeview.
Yeah, Lakeview Elementary, and high school that was down by the water, but it burned down. I forget now what that was. I think that was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm from the class of 79. Are we close?
I would have graduated in, geez, 72 or 1, I think. Yeah.
The questions get harder, Alan.
At least,
He moved to California when he was about 12. So he
Yeah,
actually,
it's just-
Oh,
it shows you how small the world is, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's crazy. Actually, here, I'll tell you this story, because my girlfriend grew up on Finn Hill too, which is just above Juanita Beach. And the woods that I used to play in and get lost in and play in the ponds and just go out and be in nature, eventually I moved away from that there, but she moved in, and she moved into a house that was now built where those woods were.
Wow.
I know, it's pretty well. That's so one, Kirkland is a magical place. I truly believe that.
Yes.
That's really cool. So you guys came together, and these 10 terrains then began to evolve with you as I think you mentioned at that time you guys were a couple and you began to figure this out together. Is that the way that goes?
Well, we were looking at a number of other ways of looking at things, and some of these other anthropomorphic and anthropological models had the beginnings of what the 10 terrains is showing us for the first 4 terrains, because they were kind of looking back at our history, but they weren't really seeing what goes together after that. So what I was looking at as well, if we have this cosmological structure of consciousness being the foundation, and I've studied the Kabbalah and many other deep mysteries for a long, long time. So I was looking at some parallels there. And with that idea, I realized that we had a sort of an outline here that needed to be fleshed out. And so we kind of put some of the pieces from the other, anthropology at one end, and then sort of non-local consciousness at the other end. And it just started evolving itself. It just, it eventually just kind of came out.
It emerged through our conversations because we both have kind of opposite brains. Alan's someone who just deeply ponders. I'm someone who makes like very quick intuitive leaps, and so sort of together we're like complete opposites. And so he'll say something and I'll just like analyze it and argue with it and jump all over the place, and he'll go away and sit with it and come back. Just together, the interrogation that we were doing of this stuff, and just like, is that really true? Is that really true? Let's just go and think about that. Is that really true? And just kept sitting with it. And then as it started to emerge, it just started to become more and more obvious. And in fact, the more it emerged, the simpler it became. Like the model became very simple. It's just actually these 10 terrains, and they're each almost like their own parallel universe. And then we were guided to, so some of you, if you're following along, actually go to 10terrains.com, TENTERRAINS.com, because you'll see at the top of the website that we've got 10 icons, 10 symbols for each of these terrains.
They're above your head, Tahnee.
Oh, above my head, but for those of you who are on audio, we can't see ourselves, I forgot they were there. So yes, we've got these 10 icons. And it really, there was a moment where we just were really guided to even simplify it to the point of a visual picture of each, because they kind of tell a story of the evolution of consciousness, both as a collective, but also as an individual. And so as we were talking and sitting with it, it just kept emerging. And then we started to realize, well, as people are shifting from one terrain to the next, different things happen at every point along that journey as well. And we started to see the subtleties, and there's much more subtleties. As someone goes more deeply into this work, they'll see that there's a lot of subtleties, a lot of layers to this. But if you just step back and look at the very simplest view of it, it's very, very clear. And so the more we talked about it, it became clearer. And then one day we were like, and we really weren't, as I said, we didn't sit down and plan to do this. We were working on our other projects, but it just kept coming out of our discussions. And one day I said to Alan, I wonder if I should just write some of this down, and then we can get back to our projects. And ended up writing 1,000 pages and that's not the book that we published. The book is a short summary of the model, but the model got fleshed out in these 1,000 pages. I'd write something and I go, is that really true? And then we discuss it and go back and rewrite it. Ended up being a huge, and then it was just like, I don't think we're going back to our other projects. And we started sharing it with our friends, and people were like, that's really explaining a lot. That feels really true for me. Yeah. We started to realize it was living as very truthful for a lot of other people. And we've never sort of said, believe us, take our word for it. We just say, here's this thing, go and try it on for size, see if it lives for you, see if it explains things in your life. And we found repeatedly people coming back and saying, oh my God, I understand my dad now. I get why we don't get along. Oh my God. Even my own father said to me, I finally understand your mother, because my mother was 3 terrains apart from him. And he read our book and he was like, I finally understand. So we just started seeing a lot. People were finding it helpful, firstly for their own journey, to understand where they're at this point in their journey of evolution, why they're having the challenges they're having, and why they're learning the particular lessons they're learning at the moment. but also to help get along with other people in their lives who perhaps are at a different terrain and have a fundamentally different worldview. And then we noticed there was a third group of people who were coming to this work, which were people who really wanted to understand the world, people a bit more like Alan who understand the politics, playing it on a macro level. They were also getting a lot of answers from this. So we started to realize it was really living for people in the personal, in the interpersonal, and in the political.
And it's
Because, yeah, I don't want to step on Jackie too much longer, but something that which really perked my ears from one of the videos that I watched this morning was your determination that an entire city or an entire group or an entire population basically can become one of these terrains, right? As a whole, as a conglomerate, they come to that. Maybe you could explain that just a little bit.
Well, what we need to explain to understand why that is because we are a singular infinite consciousness. And
Right.
as that basically is pulled away from, if I were to use this, I've got a rubber band here that I can use that. So if my finger is singularity and I sort of have a lot of charge in my field, because we're quantum, we're electrical bundles of energy, we're quantum fields. And if I've got a lot of charge, a lot of trauma, a lot of beliefs, just whatever is causing me to basically be away from myself, to be not surrendered, which is what you become when you fully let go and just trust. And that's the journey of the spiritual journey. But depending on how you're holding yourself, you're this bundle of charge, and that's what's holding you in the position you're in. And it's really come now almost mathematically precise as we've resolved this whole thing. But groups of people, if you imagine, they're groups of energy. So you take a group of people at one terrain and another group of people at another terrain, you add them together and see what the mean is. And that shows you what the prevailing terrain is of that group. It could be a family, it could be a community. Obviously, different circles of friends are going to have different prevailing terrains because some group might be at one terrain predominantly. And so that's going to be their prevailing terrain. Another group may be at another terrain, and then they will be that average. So it's an averaging of just how everybody comes together.
And the thing is, so let's say we say a particular city is at the order-based terrain square. It doesn't mean every single person.
Right. No, I get it.
It's kind of the overarching gravity. But what it does mean is that that's the terrain that's going to govern the overarching culture, the legal systems, the kind of art, the kind of prevailing culture. Like we think of shifts through history from the industrial era through the Renaissance to the Enlightenment. These are shifts in terrain that we saw. So the people who were at the vanguard of the Enlightenment, they were at Diamond, and they were really far ahead of everyone else in their culture, because at that time the culture was really a pyramid starting to move to square. And so it's like at any given point in history, you can look at the Western world or the whole of humanity where it's at as a collective, but there's always going to be people who aren't yet at that point, or people who are leading edge of that point, or who are beyond that point. And so it's interesting for people when they do our quiz and they find out, so you can do a quiz, it takes about 10 minutes, it's like a self-analysis, it's quite fun, and you find out your terrain, and then you can start to realize if you're not at the same terrain as the culture, because at the moment we are at the reflection-based terrain Diamond in the sort of Western world, if you're not at Diamond, you might start to understand why there's some things about our culture that you struggle with, or you don't quite fit you right. You're not quite at ease as much as someone who's actually at that terrain. So you can start to understand that. And also if you're in a community, a local community, or a family that's at a different terrain to you, let's say you're at a Diamond family and you're at Circle, or you're in a Square family and you're at Diamond, and it's like no one really gets you. They don't really understand where you're coming from. You don't quite fit in. And that's a really common experience. And people often think it's to do with personality type and stuff. And there's sometimes it is, but sometimes it's something deeper that's actually a terrain of consciousness that you're at. It's something much deeper than personality types.
Fascinating.
So this isn't like a personality assessment. This, I think you call it, is a filter. There's 10 different filters of your interpretation of what you deem as reality, right?
Yes.
And go ahead.
Well, the terrain word itself was very carefully selected, and I've kind of evolved the definition of what terrain means. It's the condition upon which something manifests. So in the land, you've got conditions upon which different kinds of trees and plants manifest. with terrains in the body and in our intestines. We, learning a lot about our microbiome health. Different terrains, result in different kinds of flora, and then that makes you either healthy or not. Well, the same is true with consciousness. Different terrains in the psyche are going to give rise to different perceptions, different values, different beliefs. And really, if you were to think of like colored glasses, there's like 10 parallel universes or 10 different sets of colored glasses or filters, as you suggested, on how one sees this one infinite consciousness. And that's where we have then quite a fascinating journey of languaging, because each terrain has its own language, its own memetics, its own listening. And so from a coaching perspective, or even, in kind of human relation or each person you're with is seeing the world through, and you can talk to them in a language, in words, specific languages, keywords even, that will make them feel safe and gotten and heard. Wow. and they will relax. Where otherwise, if you're talking just from your perspective and your language, they're going to feel unsafe, they're going to feel not gotten, and they're going to be defensive. So it's so much of communication and compassion is really about understanding the shoes somebody else is walking in the world and how they're seeing the world. And so this model gives an insight into that that's never been available before.
And in terms of your question, Jackie, about, how does it relate to personality types? We get asked this a lot. And I'm someone who's really interested in personality types. Like I've studied all the systems, Myers-Briggs and DISC and Enneagram and human design.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me.
I love all that stuff, right? Because I want to understand people, and he does too. So we know what each other is in every possible thing. And that stuff is really, really helpful, because obviously a lot of clashes between people come from the fact that one's an introvert, one's an extrovert, one's abstract, one's concrete, and all those kind of things. But most of us already know that stuff. A lot of that stuff's been out in the world for decades. A lot of people have at least some degree of understanding of things like that. The thing is, a terrain is actually something that's also happening, but it's happening in a very different way. It's much more similar to where you are than who you are. So for example, it's closer to your age. Like you could be a Gemini, ENFP, 3 Enneagram at 11 years old, and you could be all those things at 12 years old, and you're still got the same personality type, but you're at a different point in your age journey, in your evolutionary journey. Same with your terrain. You could be ENTJ, Myers-Briggs, you could be a Scorpio, you could have a manifesting generator, human design, and you're at square. And then one day you shift to diamond and your whole sense of self changes, your relationship to reality, the way you're seeing the world, the way you're viewing authority figures, your path in life changes, but you're still a Scorpio. You're still an ENTJ, you're still extroverted and abstract, but you'll express that personality very differently at that terrain than you did at the previous terrain. So as people expand in their awareness, they embody and express their personality type, their star sign, all those kinds of things. They're still the same person, but they're just a different version of that.
I just want to take a minute and remind our listeners that you are listening to Life Mastery Radio with Todd and Jackie. And our guests today are Alan David Reed and Tahnee Woolf. And they have written a book called The 10 Terrains of Consciousness. And you can find that on Amazon. There is a Kindle version. And I found this kind of explains a little bit more. Through their researching of trends and evolutionary patterns of humanity, the 10 Terrains of Consciousness model began to reveal itself to Tahnee and Alan, and they just spent the first half of the show explaining that to us. It continued to emerge out of their ever unfolding conversations and relentlessly deep inquiry into people, the world, and consciousness, as together they sought to gain a greater understanding of life's great puzzle, or grand puzzle, I should say. Okay, Tahnee and Alan, both Jackie and I took the test. It was very easy to do and a lot of fun. But one thing I wanted to ask you about was, I found myself having to decide which one is more true. Is that a common experience?
Yes, it's actually deliberately designed that way. We have had a long evolution in developing this quiz because, as you can imagine, it's not the easiest thing in the world to try and assess someone's core relationship with reality and get underneath everything they've read in books, and have they done an ayahuasca journey, and have they sat at the foot of a guru, and have they meditated for years, and how many books have they read about spirituality? And often that stuff is not the same as where they're at in an embodied sense on their journey. So it took us a long time, a number of years to get a process that assessed that. And initially we had a very long, detailed questionnaire, which involved writing essays, and we spent hours with people, and we got really, really accurate. And over time we realized, well, if people all around the world want to do this, we can't do that with everyone. So we have to find a way to do this that's automated and quicker and easy for people. It doesn't take hours of their time. But we took everything we learned from that deeper process that we did with people for a few years, and all the patterns we saw, and we realized that actually once we got the language right and the exact sentences to ask people, we were coming out with people getting the same result from this 10-minute quiz than they used to get, because we got the same people to go back and do this new quiz, and they came out at the same place. And we really are forcing people to make a choice in every point in this quiz, which really feels more true for me. And some people who are kind of gut response people find that really easy, like that one. Someone like me who's more like to sit with things finds it really hard to answer. Everybody's different. But it does end up very accurate for the vast majority of people. There's always a few exceptions. But what we have found is, because when people do the quiz, they have the opportunity to get a report that's very specific to that point in their journey. It's a 40-page report. Let's say you're moving from circle to spiral like you are, Todd. You'll get a report that talks about what does it mean to be at the connection-based terrain circle? What does it mean that you're actually in the process of moving to the next terrain, the coherence-based terrain spiral? And it talks about all the challenges that you're probably facing at this point in your journey, and how everyone else around the world at this point is facing the same challenges, learning the same lessons that you're really learning at the moment, but also the gifts that you're here to give at that point in your journey, because each terrain is equally important, and each terrain has its own amazing gifts to give us as a collective. And so people will read this, and often what we found is people do the quiz and they go, oh, it's a 10-minute thing, is it really accurate? And they get their report and they read it. Some people go, oh my God, you've nailed me, that's just explained everything I've been wrong. They just like cry and they write to us, oh my God. And then other people kind of read it and they go, no, that's totally not me. But then like 3 months later, they email us going, you know, it's interesting, some stuff's happened, and I've realized actually that report was kind of had both responses. We haven't had many people who, after sitting with it, really felt that it was inaccurate. It's just sometimes hard to see your own terrain, especially people who are at the reflection-based terrain diamond, because that's a terrain really about deciding your own identity and choosing your own identity and choosing your own path. And people can take on an identity at that terrain, and sometimes that identity is a spiritual identity, which is fine. But if they then do the quiz and find out they're at diamond, in their mind, they might have thought, I'm an infinity, I'm an enlightened being, I've done a lot of ayahuasca.
I'm still evolving.
Everybody's on a journey. And then they read the report and it's kind of like, oh, I'm at diamond, that doesn't seem true. But then as they sit with it, they realize actually it is true. They have a huge amount of spiritual understanding, and they're still at this particular point in their journey where they're at within themselves.
What I found what I found interesting is that you say you can't choose your terrain, and you can't even necessarily decide, I'm going to get out of this terrain and I'm going to hop to the next one, right? So what generally happens in someone's life where they transition to another terrain? What's happening in their life to do that? And are they aware of that?
You're held where you're held because of the energy in your field, your electrical charge. Like, you know, some people have a lot of charge on us on a certain topic, let's say, and you even say that in the language, or they got a lot of charge. Well, that charge is holding you in judgment, and that judgment is holding you separate from your infinite self. So that's the simple explanation. So you're where you're at because of this bundle of charge, and you can't make that go away. It is just where you're holding yourself, because this is almost down to physics and math now, to where you are this bundle of electrical charge. You are sitting there, and in order to have that discharge allow you to come back to yourself, because this is, again, as I use this example of this rubber band, as you heal this charge, and this is the spiritual journey, as you learn to surrender, as you learn to trust, as you let go of the stories, as you heal the traumas, the universe, the body, it's a self-healing system. And so naturally that charge will relax and relax until finally there's no charge left. And that's what coming to neutrality, or essentially enlightenment, is all about. But that's a journey that we take on, if we choose to, in our lives, to really come into our being, our beinghood. And so this is something that is, I've heard it said, all are called and few choose to listen. We have the opportunity, each of us, to really do the work. And this is the difference, like as Tahnee was mentioning, what these terrains really show themselves is when a crisis happens, or when your charge comes up, or when you're triggered. You can read all these spiritual books and think, oh, I've got all this esoteric knowledge. But when something happens in your life and you get into an argument with someone, that's when your terrain just shows itself instantly, because you're not being gracious, you're not being humble. You've got charge, you're defended, you're in judgment, you're in opposition, you're essentially in separation. And so that's when we start to see where we really are sitting. And this is a journey for all of us to come to learn to not only accept ourselves, but accept each other. And this is our school. This is our learn. This actually is a mystery school. It may be a simple set of icons at the surface that tell an entire story to your unconscious, but to drop into this is probably one of the deepest mystery schools I've come across, and I've looked at many.
Well,
and in terms of your question, Jackie, do people know if they've had a terrain shift? What we've noticed since we've started putting this material out is that often people are drawn to our work. I mean, everyone's guided to the kinds of books they read and the kinds of ideas they're exposed to. People are often guided to pick up our book, or to stumble on our YouTube channel, or talk to someone who's heard about it at a point in their journey where they are shifting to the next terrain, or they've just had a terrain shift. And they don't know what's happened. They just know that they don't resonate with the same people anymore. They don't really feel called to do the same work anymore. They don't necessarily want to live in that area anymore. And their family's thinking they're weird because they're not holding the same beliefs and values they used to hold. And suddenly they're not getting along with the people they used to, and they're drawn to different people. But they don't know why, because they don't know about the 10 terrains. They just know something has changed. I've awakened. Something in me is woken up. I don't see the world the way I used to. And at that point, if someone stumbles onto this work and does the quiz or reads the book and figures out where they're at in their journey, they go, oh my God, that explains what's happened. I've just had a terrain shift. Loads of people have had this exact same shift, and they've survived it, and they've integrated it, and they've found new work that resonates with them, and new people and new communities. And so, yeah, it's not something that people are aware of in terms of understanding what it is, but they know that something's happened. It's a big awakening when someone shifts terrain. And I should just say that not everybody does shift terrain. Like, we're all here for a very different purpose. We all have a very different journey. There's no goal to shift terrain. There's no goal to end up at infinity. No one's going to give you a prize or a trophy. Like, we're all here just in this school of life, learning, contributing to the collective in our own way. Some people might stay at the same terrain their whole life. Like, it could be that their purpose on this planet is to do something specific that requires them to study in that terrain for a long time in order, think of someone like Abraham Lincoln, who ended slavery. He had to be at square at the order-based terrain, so that he was coming in reaction to the previous terrain, the will-based terrain pyramid, which was very much about domination over others and hoarding power and amassing power in order to feel safe. Someone at square is always going to want to end slavery so that they can make a fair system that applies equally to everybody. And so you can't end slavery unless you're at square. So he needed to spend his life at that terrain. So there's lots of people who have a big purpose on the planet and need to go deeply into their terrain. And then there's other people whose life purpose involves them to have a broader view of humanity. So maybe they've shifted through several terrains in their own life so that they can really understand and get what it's like to be at those different terrains, because they've personally lived them. And we're an example that both of us have had several terrain shifts because we needed to have really lived this to really get what is actually playing out at each terrain. So everybody's journey is different. And it's really useful to understand this, because you might start out, for example, in a marriage. Two people might be at diamond when they marry, and then one of them has a journey of awakening. Something happens in their life. They have a health condition, or they lose their job, and they have a big crisis, and they start to change and awaken, and things shift in how they're seeing the world, and they shift to circle, the connection-based terrain. And now these two, husband and wife, they're not at the same terrain, and they're having more arguments than they used to have because they don't see the world the same way. So there's a lot of what happens because we all grow and evolve at different speeds. We all have a different purpose. So the more you understand this, you can start to have compassion, as Alan was saying, for where the other person is at, and where you're at, and not expecting them to have the same journey as you, and not needing them to grow and weaken, and just like let someone be where they're at, because there's a reason that they're there, and it's an important reason, and it's not up to you to ask someone to be where they're not.
Wow, it's a lot to consider.
Probably just threw 400 ideas into one answer. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think one explanation used the metaphor of a balloon, a hot air balloon, right? That we're being these different levels of consciousness does not make us smarter or better or wealthier or anything like that. It's simply a different perspective. And as you go up higher in a hot air balloon, you just get to see a broader perspective of the landscape. And so I like that explanation. It helped me really understand what these terrains will do, that it's not necessarily something to strive to get to the end of. It's just that you need to appreciate where you are with your current perspective. And by understanding that better, you'll be able to, I don't know, react more to all kinds of things happening through life.
Phone just went off. Sorry about that.
No
Yeah,
worries.
that's actually a really good point you brought up, because a lot of people, because at the moment we're coming from a diamond culture collectively, the reflection-based terrain, which is all about, what is my identity? How do I fit into the whole relative to everyone else? It's a very relative thinking. So people are always, is this person ahead of me? Are they more expanded than me? So there's a lot of thinking of, I want to be at the next terrain. I want to expand. I want to grow. But in actual fact, no terrain is better than another. It's like being 14 years old is not better than being 22 years old. They're just different. Right. It's just a different perspective on life. And in fact, I have incredibly wise people in my life at every terrain, and I have very annoying people in my life at every terrain. Like, it's nothing to do with how mature you are or how wise you are. And in fact, this whole kind of thinking that comes at diamonds, I want to be enlightened, I want to be an expanded being. It's actually not so easy to be an expanded being. Like someone who's at the unity-based terrain infinity, they don't get to have as many bad hair days as everyone else. They really have to be constantly centering themselves and coming back into love, and not allowing themselves to be triggered, and taking full responsibility in every moment for what's showing up in their lives, and staying in a place of deep humility, and have zero attachment to anything playing out in their life. And that's not the easiest thing to do. So like, would you really want to be at that place?
We need to we need to look at from a different perspective. The ego only sees what's going on in this lifetime. So it's sort of wanting to make things happen and run around. When you realize you're an infinite spiritual being, you're infinite, you're immortal, you're infinite consciousness. And when you really get settled into that awareness, you are along this journey for as many lifetimes as it takes. And so if you're sitting in some place, that's because that's where your work is. That's what you've chosen in your infinite creation of yourself. If you're sitting at diamond, or you're sitting at square, or you're sitting at circle, you're there because that's where you, as an infinite consciousness, have chosen to be at this moment to get something. There's a lesson there. There's a learning there. That's your school. And really to be doing the spiritual work, if you will, is to not try and run away from that and sort of be off with the fairies. It's to really be centered and present in that moment with where you're at, because the idea of knowing who am I is what most of us come to at some point in our life. Why am I here? Who am I? Well, when you get to understand where you are, that starts to back you into answering the question of who you are, because you're where you're at for a reason. Yeah. And so we really want to encourage people to take that on board, because you're just making misery for yourself if you try to be something other than where your self is holding you. And yeah, if you're trying to run away from it, you're just going to come back again and again, like Groundhog Day. You're just going to come back to the same point again and again until you finally go, okay, I'm supposed to get something here. And then it's like, okay, finally you get that and things can move on.
That, Alan, that is a grand perspective. I think that really opens the idea up to understanding it a little bit more. That's very cool. My friends, we only have about 7 minutes left. I certainly hope that you will come back on the show, because there's so much more to talk about. I am just fascinated. I'm going to dig in a little bit more. So, but we got to answer the ultimate question. I did not go back to the book and check it. So the quiz told me that I'm a circle evolving into a spiral. Give me the lowdown.
Okay, low down on circle moving to spiral. Actually, a lot of the people who are drawn to our work are at exactly that point in their journey. It's really interesting. We would say that is the target audience who love the 10 terrains. Because circle, the connection-based terrain circle is the terrain from the previous one, the reflection-based terrain diamond. The shift from diamond to circle is from head to heart and from doing into being and from outer to inner. So people at circle are very connected to the web of life. They're connected to their community. They're very much coming from their heart. And they're in a very embodied journey. They're working with their emotions, they're working with their feelings, like they're coming from a place of vulnerability and inner truth. And what starts to happen as someone shifts from circle to spiral is they're starting to awaken into a multidimensional sense of self. They're much more coming from guidance, like intuitive guidance, that then tends to be body guidance. More at circle, at spiral, it tends to be more intuitive guidance, starting to come into a place of real self-responsibility and a really deep understanding that they're creating their reality from the inside out. And people at circle moving to spiral starts to be doing more shadow work and how am I creating my reality? Yeah, just really starting to learn to come into alignment at all levels of their being and to sense into coherence. That's why we call it the coherence-based terrain. It's all about, you know, how am I coming into alignment? What resonates with me in this moment? And maybe it didn't resonate with me 5 minutes ago, and that's okay. They're always in the now as they move into spiral. And it's very much a sensitivity to energy. And so people, as people shift from circle to spiral, sometimes it can be a very disconcerting awakening of suddenly experiencing yourself as a multidimensional being. What the hell is happening? And for other people, it can happen over a period of decades. So it's a very gentle change. Does that resonate?
I'm there. It's almost like, yeah, things to me are just different, right? And my world is like, you know, it almost seems, Tahnee, like I got 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
Well, that's how you'll start to experience it, because the first 6 terrains are a single reference terrains. They just sort of see themselves. As you move to spiral, you start to see yourself and you see all of the others in context. So the final 4 terrains really are a multi-focus and a multi-perspective. So you really do feel like you are stepping out of this world because of the constraints and the confined beliefs that are happening are starting to lessen, because you're starting to see the bigger picture and you're starting to feel that there's more going on. And so it is a journey of expansion, and it's an expansion into just the infinite being we are, because at the core of who each of us are, we're an infinite power. We're an amazing potential. So we need to honor that in ourselves. And this is the journey back into that power within ourselves.
And each shift from one to the next is really massive. Like it's a really big change in your whole perspective. So if you're feeling I'm kind of in 2 worlds, and you are, like as you're transitioning from one terrain to another, it's a really big change. Once you arrive fully into the next terrain, it becomes a little bit more coherent. You're just in this kind of one place. But as you're moving from one to the next, it's kind of like that moment if you were to step from France into Italy and you've still got 1 foot in France, the other foot's in Italy. You're not quite in France, you're not quite in Italy. That's where someone's at, as they're sort of journeying from one terrain to the next. And they're starting to draw experiences to them and teachers and information from the next terrain. Like you'll have people showing up in your life who are kind of teaching you and modeling for you what life can be like at that terrain. So often you'll start to see that coming into your life as you're starting this journey. And as I said, the journey can be different. For some people, it could be a very quick, massive awakening that happens overnight. And for some people, it could happen slowly over decades. So it's always going to be different.
And there are some people who've had near-death experiences, and they may have been sitting at square, and then they just got basically blown into an infinite awareness, and they come back and they're not afraid of death. They realize what they were doing are just like, wait a minute, you know, they're just completely just day and night different. Because now they've just, all of the limitation and constraints that they were holding themselves inside of, well, I've got to, you know, work and do this and save up, and, you know, just the fear that was driving them, that's all gone. And now they're just like, okay, I'm unleashed. I can just go do whatever I want. And they have total trust and faith in it. And it's like they were walking this way and also they just took a right turn and they're off.
But that is quite rare. That is quite rare. For most people, it's a slow, gradual process of slowly awakening and shifting. And you don't really even notice you've changed until, oh, hang on, I'm not in Kansas anymore. Something's different.
When did I start thinking like this?
Yeah, when did this? Yeah.
Oh my goodness, my friends. I want to thank you so much for showing up today as yourselves. and explaining this to us. I think I am just fast. I hope you'll come back on the show. Will you come back on the show?
We'd love to share with you more.
And did you have fun?
So much fun.
Yes.
Okay. I fulfilled my destiny for today.
I'm all about fun. We're probably the same personality type.
Oh, well, you know, we talked about that, and I was blown away when I first got involved in Enneagrams and found out I was 5. And when I read that, I was just like, how could they peg me so tightly?
Yeah.
It's interesting. All this stuff is so interesting.
It's fascinating. Jackie, quickly, any takeaways? I hope I didn't hog the show today, but man, I was just blown away.
No, I'm so glad we got to hear from Alan and Tahnee. I am fascinated as well, and I'm feeling like I want to bust out of the terrain I'm in. It doesn't feel comfortable anymore. So I'm thinking maybe there's some ways I can help that shift happen. But anyway, yeah, I really enjoyed hearing from you guys. I love what you've done. I appreciate it very much, and I wish you the best of luck going forward.
And I'll just say to you, Jackie, what you were just expressing, if you're feeling that, there's nothing you need to do, because it probably means you are in the process of shifting.
Okay.
Feeling that kind of, oh, this doesn't quite fit me anymore.
Jackie's going to jump up and catch me as a circle. That's what she's saying. Thanks again. I want to remind our listeners to go to their website, 10terrains.com. You can find their book. We are under the wire. So lastly, I would just say, please make it a great day, because it's all about choice, and choose to check out the 10 terrains. Bye-bye for now.
Nice seeing you.
See you guys.
Bye for now.